You check the price of gold, $4,612 an ounce. Silver is sitting around 85, and for just a second, your stomach tightens. Not because you don't believe in gold, but because you recognize that feeling. The one that says, I'm late. Everyone else already made their money. This is probably the top. That feeling has stopped more people from protecting their wealth than any market crash ever has. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That feeling is exactly what shows up right before people realize they were watching the wrong thing the entire time. Because while you were staring at the price, quietly asking whether you missed it, central banks around the world were doing something very different. They weren't hesitating. They weren't debating timing. They bought over 1,000 tons of gold last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. No headlines, no excitement, no urgency. Just steady, deliberate accumulation.
Now let me tell you why that matters, and why price alone is the least important part of this story. The last time central banks bought gold at this pace was 1967. If you know monetary history, that year should make you pause. In 1967, the global system still looked stable. Currencies were tied to the dollar. The dollar was tied to gold at $35 an ounce, and everyone publicly said everything was fine. But privately, central banks could see the math wasn't working. The United States was printing more dollars than it had gold to back, so they did what rational institutions always do. They didn't panic, they didn't announce it, they repositioned. They converted paper promises into physical gold. By 1971, the system broke. By 1980, gold was over $800 an ounce. Not because gold suddenly became valuable, but because the system changed. And here's the most important point most people miss. Central banks don't buy gold because they think the price is going up. They buy gold because they think the rules are changing. That's exactly what we're seeing again. Record gold purchases, countries reducing dollar reserves.
Physical gold being brought home, trade settling outside the dollar system. None of these things alone mean much. All of them happening together is a signal. Now, before we go further, I want you to notice something. This conversation has nothing to do with hype, nothing to do with fear, nothing to do with predicting a crash. This is about understanding the architecture of the monetary system you live inside. Because if you understand the architecture, the price starts to make sense. Let's talk about the dollar. The dollar isn't collapsing. It isn't going to zero, but its dominance is slowly eroding. In 2008, about 65% of global reserves were held in dollars. By 2024, that number had fallen to 58%. That might not sound dramatic, but that represents trillions of dollars moving out of dollar-denominated assets and into alternatives. Some into other currencies, a meaningful portion into gold. And this isn't just about diversification, it's about control. Countries don't just want to own gold, they want it physically in their possession. Germany brought hundreds of tons home. Poland did the same. Turkey did the same.
Because if you're preparing for a world where assets can be frozen, sanctioned, or leveraged politically, possession matters. Gold doesn't rely on trust. That's the point. Now let me pause you here for a moment, because this is where most people misunderstand what's actually happening. You may have heard headlines about Basel III and gold. Let's remove the noise. Gold has been classified as a Tier 1 asset since 1988. That part isn't new. What changed is how banks must treat physical gold versus paper gold. Allocated physical gold remains Tier 1. Unallocated paper claims now carry heavy risk weightings. That quietly incentivizes banks to hold real metal, not promises. No hype, no conspiracy, just balance sheet math. And those changes roll out over years, not months. This brings us to the supply problem. Global gold production is roughly 3,000 tons per year. Industrial and jewelry demand consume about 2,000 tons. Central banks are buying over 1,000 tons annually. That alone absorbs essentially all available supply, before you even consider ETFs, private investors, or institutional allocation. Silver is even tighter. Silver isn't just money.
It's industrial, solar panels, electric vehicles, electronics, data centers, and much of silver production is a byproduct of other mining. You can't simply produce more because the price went up, which is why physical silver is trading at growing premiums and long delivery times. That gap between paper prices and physical availability is important because eventually reality wins. Now, let me reset this conversation for a moment, because if you've stayed with me this far, here's the key question you should be asking. This isn't, will gold go higher next month? This is, what happens to currencies when global demand for them slowly declines? For 75 years, the world ran on a system where oil was priced in dollars. That meant every country needed dollars, which meant they held dollar reserves, which meant they bought U.S. debt. That system isn't ending overnight, but it is evolving. Saudi Arabia now accepts multiple currencies for oil. China settles trade outside the dollar. Alternative payment systems are being built. When you're no longer the only option, you lose pricing power. And when demand for dollars falls, those dollars don't disappear. They come home. And when they come home, they either inflate asset prices or erode purchasing power. This is why central banks are buying gold. Not to get rich, but to preserve purchasing power. Gold doesn't produce income, it doesn't grow, but it also can't be printed, it can't be debased, and it's accepted everywhere. That's why it has survived every monetary system in history. So where does that leave you? If you're wondering whether to buy gold or silver at these prices, you're asking the wrong question. This isn't a trade. It's not about timing tops or bottoms. It's about positioning during a multi-decade monetary shift. Most professionals suggest 5 to 10%. Not everything, not speculation, insurance. If the system remains stable, gold simply keeps pace. If the system continues to shift, gold preserves what currency loses. And here's the final thing I want you to understand. This process is slow, years, possibly decades. Central banks aren't trading headlines, they're repositioning for a different era. And that's the real decision in front of you. Not whether gold is expensive, but whether you're paying attention to what the people who control the system are actually doing, because they're not talking, they're buying. And they started long before gold ever crossed $4,600.